intuition and discernment, again, would chart a course for wisdom and us saying that feels, seems, and looks like the best path forward, all things considered. So I think as we enter into the red zone a little bit with our society creaking under the pressure, we need intuitive leaders.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Look What She Built podcast with Jaime Foster. And I have a very special guest today, Jessica Rink. How are you?
I'm so good. Thanks for having me again. I love this show.
Well, I love having you on the show. I think it should be a weekly thing because I learn something from you every time that we meet. And I always feel warm and fuzzy. And I hope everyone listening today feels the same way.
Thank you so much.
Well, and I love the topic today because it's an interesting topic and sometimes it can be like loosey-goosey. What is this? I don't understand. This is way in the feminine because we're talking about intuition. For everyone here, Jessica Rink, she's the founder and CEO of Intuition Mindset, an organization dedicated to helping high-powered CEOs and entrepreneurs gain a deeper understanding of their emotional intelligence, intuition, and intellect, elevating leadership to wisdom and meaning beyond the bottom line. Now we know who you are. Let's get into the good stuff. Okay, so I want to talk about intuition with you because I've gotten some pushback actually in the last couple of months from some people about what is this intuition thing and how can I trust it? How can I discern from intuition versus fear? Like, how do I know which voice is which? We're just jumping right in, and we'll take callers later. I'm just kidding. We don't take callers. So go ahead, Jessica. How would you respond to that?
It's interesting. I did a study recently on how intuition's been perceived throughout the last couple thousand years. And what I found is that depending on the culture or the dynamic that was studying intuition, everybody approaches it a little bit differently. So, for example, in Buddhism, intuition is that which connects us to the universal intelligence. And in Islam, it's a bit of the same, but it's also said to be like this prophetic capacity to be able to dialogue with the universe. And in philosophy, it was moving beyond logic and reason to come up with answers that just kind of happened upon you. Aristotle said that in order to access intuition, you had to be empty-minded to receive it. And then you take it all the way to the other side to psychology that links it to something called heuristics, which is the mind's natural capacity to jump to solutions, jump to the right answer without really having a cognitive walk back as to how you got there. It's sort of like arriving at the right answer on the test without showing your work. And so, depending on which lens we're looking at intuition through, everybody seems to have a little bit of a different take on it. So, what that leads me to believe is that intuition can be many things. It just depends on how it's used. In business intuition, which is the domain that I work in, it really links to gut instincts. And when a business executive or an entrepreneur just kind of knows the right way to go because they feel it in their gut. And there's been a ton of business leaders who absolutely rely upon this, Oprah being one of them. She credits her success to intuition. Steve Jobs did as well. Jonas Salk was the inventor of the polio vaccine, changed the lives of millions of people, perhaps billions, and said that intuition tells his mind where to look next. And so all of these people had a very special relationship with intuition and largely credited it towards their success, which I think is something we can pay attention to. Is it used to boost intellect? Yes. Is it used to boost emotional understanding? Yes. And can it be used for spiritual understanding? Yes. So it just depends on how the individual wants to approach it. And that's really where an intuition mindset comes in, is where might intuition be most useful for that executive or entrepreneur?
It sounds like intuition is the best medicine. And how even however you see it, however you utilize it through the ages, it'll take you in the right direction. And I want to go back in the business. I hear, oh, I got a gut feeling with this. That's more accepted. in the business world. I have noticed I use the word intuition and people blink a couple times and turn to the side. And then there's comments about spirituality. What about if someone is learning to use their intuition? Because I know you work with a lot of executives, how they're learning to use it, whether they call it gut or whatever the case. There's also what I teach is the inner critic, right? That critical, don't do this. It can minimize your growth or even stop it. How do you know the difference? Is this my inner critic saying this? Or is this like an intuition? Is this a hit that I didn't write anything down, but I know the math problem answer, but is that the right answer? Or is that fear speaking to me? How do you know the difference?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And the approach that I take to getting to intuition is that there are usually three powerful blockers to it, and that's fear, doubt, and control. Those domains typically belong to the inner critic. The inner critic is fearful that we'll make a mistake. It's doubtful that we'll have the right answer, so it tries to control the process. So, what's interesting about the inner critic and fear is that fear typically only knows three words: no, don't, and stop, because of the fact that the fear is trying to keep us safe, which I can totally appreciate. I just saw the Inside Out 2 sequel and I loved it. And I think it's amazing how Pixar can take such a complicated topic as how does the human mind work and make it so light and so fun and so playful. But one of those emotions in there is fear. And actually in the sequel, it's anxiety. And both fear and anxiety have important roles in our life. They tell us to use caution sometimes. And sometimes that's a good message to have. But by and large, what the intuition is attempting to do is it's attempting to move you into new territory. It's attempting to move you into a space where you might take some risks. And they're probably going to be calculated risks because your brain's doing a lot of work in the background. So when it comes to discerning, is this my critical inner voice trying to prevent me from doing something or to keep me safe? It might be. Intuition tends to come in as deeply grounded. It tends to come in as something that's incredibly supportive. And even if we're up against a challenge, intuition would say something like, go for it. See what happens. See what you can do. And intuition, from my perspective and the transformative growth work I get to do with executives and entrepreneurs, is what does your heart say about this? What does your gut say about this? Where do you think this could take you? Feel into it. And that's how that links to emotional intelligence, because I think in our business-minded worlds, we've favored the left brain logical reasoning mind so much. And that's such a good thing because it creates such analysis and problem-based thinking, which is perfect. But emotional intelligence, we've kind of cut off the other half of our brain, saying that emotions don't have a place in business. And I would disagree. I think emotions are already there and they're already leading us. We've just forgotten how to recognize their influence. So all of this to say, and why I say that intuition mindset includes emotional intelligence, intuition, and intellect, is that we must approach our minds in a balanced way. We are whole creatures and we can't sever 1 or 2/3 of ourselves in order to show up to business. We need to show up in a way that is our whole self, and therefore we're making some really complete decisions and we're thinking with our entire being.
That just makes sense. Right. And looking at the whole picture, because maybe some businesses would like their employees to not have any emotions and just be a robot. Come do your work, come here at 9, leave at 5, don't bring your problem. Have you ever heard that? I've worked at places where they're like, leave your problems at the front door. When you come here, you're here to work. And
Absolutely.
I'm like, wow, wow. I feel like it's called the beach ball, where you're pushing the emotions down, ignoring them at work, and you're pushing it down into the water. And pretty soon at some point, it's going to pop up in an explosion. Is this all interesting that this is all happening now? What do you feel like is happening now in society that we're even talking about intuition? I mean, it's been around forever since humans been around, but I feel like the conversation has been uprising, and maybe because my lens is different or people that I spend time with, their lenses are different, but what's happening now that this is being called forward?
Well, our society's changing faster than I think anybody could have ever predicted. And within the last 20 years, our daily lives look so different than they did before. I think we're all trying to get a grasp on who are we becoming as humanity as we integrate AI and enhanced technological capabilities. I mean, we are now living in the future of the science fiction novels. And personally, I was born and raised in Silicon Valley. I love the advancements. I think it's so cool what we're doing. But I think there's also a discomfort in that we are traversing the unknowns so quickly. Do we have a mechanism that's allowing us to see around the corner a little bit to say, is everything going to be okay? Intuition and discernment are two sides of the same coin, in my opinion. And when things are moving really fast, intuition would help us to say, yeah, that's a good direction to go, or we might want to rethink that a little bit. See, I think the assumption that people make is that intuition's always leading us off cliffs for these giant leaps of faith. That's not true in my experience. In fact, I would say that leaps of faith happen infrequently in our journey. Intuition and discernment, again, would chart a course for wisdom and us saying that feels, seems, and looks like the best path forward, all things considered. So I think as we enter into the red zone a little bit with our society creaking under the pressure, we need intuitive leaders. And I think that our subconscious minds are begging us to let go of some of the things that would block our intuitive discernment and block our intuitive wisdom, namely that fear, doubt, and control that seems to be pretty pervasive.
That's interesting that you brought up yet again the fear with intuition and how you're saying some people think with intuition, it's like in the movies, this big thing. They see the spaceship and then they have a hit, an intuition, or whatever the term you want to use that you're comfortable with. And then they go get the bazooka and shoot the ship down or something. So it's this very dramatic thing we see in movies. Could because we see that in movies and how much movies shape the reality of our everyday, which is so quite interesting, and shape beliefs and thoughts, actions, behaviors. Could there be a block, the fear that if I listen to my intuition, then my whole life, like major things are going to happen, which of course is very scary. There's a lot of uncertainty for humans with that. Could that also be something that's blocking it, is just the fear of using it? What would that mean if I followed my intuition in your experience?
The biggest thing that our psyche tries to protect us from in those moments is if we're living our life in a completely inauthentic way. That's the falling apart piece that the psyche is actually kind of afraid of, is that if an individual has been living their life, let's say they're chronic people pleasers, let's say that the career that they're in was influenced heavily by their family or their spouse, and they really don't even like the work that they're doing. When intuition comes in, it's going to be like, are you sure you want to be doing this? And then at that point, we're left with a question. And it's a big question that we'll have to answer. And sometimes that answer is no, I really don't like doing this type of work. I'd rather be doing this over here. That's what it was like for me when I was working a job that I had actually gotten a master's degree to go further in this field. And so I thought, okay, I'm on the right track. This is what I need to be doing. But every time I walked into that job, I had this blinding anxiety that I could not reconcile. And, I went to therapy and I did the anti-anxiety meds and all of the things that should have helped, and nothing was helping. So one day I just kind of got real still with myself and was like, what is actually going on? And a very small voice within said, really care for this work. I think you'd rather be doing something else. And that was such a scary thought to think, because then the next thought was, oh gosh, am I going to have to unwind all of this? How painful is that going to be? And realistically, it wasn't, because my intuition already had a plan for what I was supposed to do next. And it was just slowly guiding me to the next best step that I was going to take. So I would say to anybody who's contemplating an intuitive journey, the only thing you got to be afraid of is you're about to be very, very honest with yourself. And I wonder if that's a problem sometimes because we're not living our lives in an authentic way.
Well, I think exactly what you just said is it's also sitting with yourself
Yes.
without the distractions, without social media, without alcohol, without whatever your mechanism is that you go to, and sitting in silence and listening. I mean, I saw, wasn't a post you did the other day, the electrical shock thing. Could you tell them about that? Because that is fascinating to me.
I think it was a study done in the 50s. It was done quite a while ago. And the options were sit alone with your thoughts in a room by yourself for 15 to 30 minutes or receive electric shocks. And they weren't little shocks either. And the study showed that by and large, people chose to take the electric shocks over sitting with their thoughts.
Let us all sit with that. Well, I mean, it's almost equal to when they say that people are afraid of public speaking, they would rather, some people would rather, this is crazy to me. This was a study, I don't know when it was done. They would rather be burned to death
Oh my.
than speak in front of others. By the way, you actually don't, you asphyxiate, excuse me, before you actually, anyway, but from the smoke, if
Yep.
you're like a
Makes
witch
sense.
on a cross, but anyway, that's way too in depth. But otherwise, though, talk to me a little bit about, so if someone's listening now, say they're an entrepreneur or whatever the case, and they're stuck. They're stuck. They know they're not living an authentic life or maybe authentic career, or they're in their business and things aren't moving forward the way they want to. And they're like, this, I don't know, this Jessica lady I heard, she's talks about intuition. Like, what's the first step? Like, what is step one besides sitting in a room for 30 minutes by yourself? Because obviously people would rather be electrically shocked. But what is something, what is something else? What would you suggest?
I've built a practice around three words that seem to be incredibly useful. And those three words are I easily release. When we encourage our minds, which are very powerful mechanisms of our entire being, and we focus our mind and we just say, mind, you're paying attention to things that are slowing us down a little bit, like doubt. Doubt slows us down. Man, I have struggled with self-doubt personally my entire life. I'll make a decision and then second guess it to death after I've made the decision, which is actually a bit madness because the decision's already been made. And so much of my mind has been wrapped up in, did I do the right thing? And this is actually what led me to an intuitive journey, was that I started to trust my intuition in the decision-making process. Therefore, when it feels like the right answer, it is. But when we're learning to discern the intuitive voice, or at least give it permission to speak to us, we've got to release what blocks it. And like I said, that's doubt, fear, and control. And we all have very different relationships with those three things. When we say the words, I easily release all doubt, you may not feel anything at first, but when you practice it and say it with intention, you might notice that your shoulders drop, that you sigh a breath of relief, or your mind becomes just a little bit more clear. That's what happens when we tell the mind to just let go of something that it's trying to suppress, like that beach ball underwater. And doubt can be a big, big thing that we try to suppress every day. No, I know what I'm doing, sort of. And that's just doubt trying to play. And that's basically the foundation of imposter syndrome. So then you move on to the next one, and it's all right. I easily release all fear. And sometimes fear would be like, okay, great. Now that we've released the fear, what are we willing to take a tiny risk on today? Maybe we'll go left instead of right. Maybe we'll go talk to that person that seems really interesting. Maybe we'll go submit our proposal to our boss. Who knows? But we have to recognize that these things, their energies, their emotions, their feelings, doubt, fear, and control are subtly running our lives in the background, and we're not even really aware of it. So when we say, I easily release all control, that one tends to take people to some interesting places. And it's not easily said the first time around because we love to feel like we're in control. But the reality is, we're kind of not. We are and we aren't. So when we let go of control, it's that, okay, I'm going to let go of my death grip that I have on this situation, and I'm just going to see what happens next. With those three things that we commit to releasing every day, we get a new relationship with our own mind and we get a new relationship with our own body. And I've seen it time and time again. People just start to approach their life a little bit more playfully. And I think that's the point. So when it comes to intuition, the fear would be, I don't want to release all those things because what if my life changes faster than I can handle? In my experience, that's not what happens. All we're doing is we're inviting small, subtle changes so that we just start to enjoy ourselves just a little bit more. And I think with all the pressure that we feel in society right now, it couldn't come at a better time that we find mechanisms to just release some of this pressure that we're carrying, because we've got big problems to solve. And we're not going to be able to do that if we're not feeling well and feeling overly pressured and overly stressed to tackle what we need to do.
Everyone should just listen to that section one more time because I'm still like dropping in. That was so beautifully, beautifully said. And I have to say, if working with high performers, which I know you do, is that last piece that you said is I easily release control. And and I'm sure I know because you watch for energy shifts and the same here when you're working with clients is the what? No, no, I can't. I have to take this jelly donut and squeeze it so hard that all the jelly goodness comes out. And I have to control this, especially those type A personalities. Whew, that's a very uncomfortable place. And I'm sure I've seen, even in myself, some pretty disruptive anger.
Yeah.
Which I know we've talked a little bit about anger, and that easy release is beautiful. So everyone here, as you're listening, is what do you want to easily release from your life right now? And what would that feel like if you release it? What would the feeling that come up for you in your heart and your body? And feel your body shift, like from the head to your toes. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm still kind of processing. Okay, I like it. I'd like to ask you, has you released, just so this can be a role model for other people to hear, is when you say I easily release doubt, like you're saying, like I make a decision and then doubt pops in like, hey, Jessica, did you think about this? What about that? Oh, what about this? We shouldn't do that. You know, that voice or whatever, it probably doesn't sound like a cartoon character like that. But what does it feel like for you in your body? When intuition drops in, the doubt has been released. What does it feel like for you?
It's clarity. It's so simple. It's clarity. And I'd say secondarily, certainty. And to have clarity and certainty in my own life right now, when everything out there feels so loud and so demanding and noisy and chaotic sometimes, for me to have a mechanism that just offers a moment of peace and clarity, I go, I'm doing good. And I'm in that moment, I'm creating certainty for myself. Now, I can't be certain about what's going to happen over there or for you tomorrow. That's really not how intuition works. And that's another myth I'd like to bust here, is that people think that intuition is psychic ability. It's not. Those are two different things. Intuition is really designed to serve you. It's meant to serve me. When I access my intuition, it's my life, my decisions, and my energy in my body that it's looking to talk to. Your intuition's looking to serve you. And so I think that people get their lines crossed a little bit of like, oh, my intuition's going to tell you what to do. Not really. In fact, probably not. So that's why I feel it's very important that we all recognize each of us is highly intuitive, but it is a skill set that must be learned and must be committed to. And the best way to do that is by removing the blocks that we have set up for ourselves to not listen to intuition. As kids, we were highly intuitive, highly, highly intuitive. We knew what we liked. We knew what we didn't like. It was just us being with us. Our intuition was guiding us in a way that would paint the best possible life for us as kids. And somewhere along the lines, we were possibly encouraged or denied our ability to build up our intuition in a meaningful way. There are some people out there who are very linked with their intuition, and we know them well. They exist in the creative realms. Have you ever seen like a really intuitive artist that just seems to have this unique relationship with the canvas, and they're tuning into something greater than themselves, and then they deliver this painting and we're like, my gosh, where did that come from? And they say simply, I just followed my intuition. I just followed the brushstrokes in the way that they wanted to go. That's exactly what intuition does, but it paints a picture of our life. And in business, it can paint a picture of our business life too. It just depends on which canvas we're attempting to paint on.
Can we talk about that a little bit before we do our speed round here for just a moment? I want to ask you something that someone has shared with me, and gosh, I'm just thinking some art. I don't know if Ev has ever stood in front of a piece of artwork just in awe.
Moved.
Completely, yes, moved. I can't think of the sculptor, but he's in the Louvre. And I stood in front of a sculptor. It was in marble, and it was a woman with a veil over her face.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I just stood there. I don't know for how long, and just in complete awe of it, of the beauty of life. Like the whole world just opened up for a few moments. Okay. And we're back. I had someone say this to me and tell me if this goes in line, because some people are like, how do I build my intuition? How do I strengthen it? You gave some great options and tips. I've also heard, if anyone else has heard this too, is make commitments to yourself and then follow through with them. Because if you make commitments to yourself, like I promise to meditate every morning for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, and you start following through with them, then you're building trust in yourself. When you build trust with yourself, then when that voice comes in, like, hey, have you tried this? You'd be like, oh, I trust you. I know who you are. And then that strengthens your intuition. Have you heard of this, or is this garbage? I'd like to get
Absolutely. No, it's completely
okay.
true. Intuition is a relationship with the deepest parts of ourselves. And when we're committed to releasing what blocks intuition and we're giving our intuition permission to speak with us, that's actually something that's a little known fact. Intuition requires your permission because it respects your boundaries. And if you're like, I don't want to talk to you, intuition, I don't want you to inform on my life, it won't. So when we give ourselves permission to be intuitive and say, you know what, I don't know about you quite yet, but I'd like to experiment with you. I'm giving you permission to speak to me in that small voice. I will listen. Then that starts the entire journey. So for somebody who's serious about this, it's very simple. Release the doubt, release the fear, release the control. After you've done that, you've opened up a small window in your consciousness for your intuition to speak with you. Ask it a question very specifically, like, should I take the job? And then just pause and see what comes forward. And whatever comes forward after you've released doubt, after you've released control, and after you've released fear is your intuitive voice speaking with you. Because I'm scientifically minded and was a super cynic my entire life and actually didn't believe in anything like intuition or psychic ability, none of it. I had to prove to myself that this was real. So I kept a journal and was like, all right, I got a feeling, I got an intuitive nudge that I should do this today. So I'd write it down. Whether or not I actually did that thing was up to me. Some days I would, some days I wouldn't. But the days that I would follow the intuitive nudge, I'd circle back to my journal and I say, this is how that turned out. Over time, I realized that my intuition was so friggin' spot on for me. And it was creating so many amazingly beautiful and rich experiences that my little control-y type A brain was not allowing for. It at that point was a non-issue. I just said, okay, intuition, you clearly know what you're doing here. And it was at that point where I dove in head first and just got a passion for telling other people that this is a lot easier and more accessible than one would think.
I love that so much because I feel like the left side of your brain was like, oh, yeah, well, prove it to me. Let's go. Journal. Show me. And
exactly what happened.
we need to go, right? Sometimes that's where we need to go. I think it's important to know where you need to go.
Yes.
And to bring that forth in order to get the full value out of this, because some of the greatest minds, even Steve Jobs is quoted about using his intuition and building all the incredible technology he's brought to this world.
More important than intellect is what he said.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready for the speed round?
So ready. Thank you.
So I did this probably the first 50 episodes of this show. I don't know where we're at in 120 or whatever the case we are now. And then I stopped for a while. And this is just how my intuition works. Let's play. And sometimes we want to play and sometimes not. All right. Question number 1. What is your favorite book or movie?
Question. And it's a speed round, so I have to answer.
Yeah.
Okay, my favorite book right now is called Hero of Two Worlds. And it is by Mike Duncan, and it's about the Marquis de Lafayette, who was the revolutionary who helped not only the American Revolution, but the French Revolution too. And it's such a fascinating book on culture that's about to shift. And my perception is that our culture is about to shift in much of the same way. And we need revolutionaries to step up. And I just love this biography about this man who stepped up in some incredibly amazing circumstances for not only the US, but France as well.
Ooh, history buff. I like it. Thank you for that. All right. Number 2, something most people don't know about me is.
I love antlers.
What the? I did
Yeah.
not expect that answer. You love antlers?
Antlers.
Uh,
Antlers. Yeah, like deer and elk antlers. They are fascinating. Every single one of them is unique and they are really hard to find. And my partner is a very established and very successful antler hunter. They call it shed hunting. And
yes.
he's one of the best in the world at it. And so he's taught me how to do that as well. And it is so interesting to find where antlers fall because they fall off deer and elk's head every year. And we just run around the mountains and go look for them. And it's hard and it's a unique activity and a lot of fun.
That is so interesting. That's very interesting. I actually used to sell antlers with my pet distribution business, and we bought it from a company of people that would go out that were exactly this. They were shed hunters or whatever the case.
Yep.
They were so expensive to ship. They're so heavy. Anyway, okay.
Imagine carrying them off a mountain. Yes.
Yeah, I can imagine. And where you find them. Okay, that's a whole other conversation. I tap into my feminine radiance and masculine presence when you can choose either one or a combination.
When I write.
Beautiful. And last question is, my greatest hope for the world is.
Oh, that's easy. That everyone remembers that they're intuitive, that everyone remembers that they have access to a voice that loves them, guides them, and protects them.
Wouldn't that be a better world?
Very much.
Thank you for the conversation today, Jessica. I really appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having me. I love this show. Love you. Love what you're doing.
I love you too. Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening today. And Jessica, where can they find you really quick before, see, I'm getting all like sappy and the emotions are kind of so much love and appreciation for you in my life. And I'm like, wait a minute, your business. Where's the best people for people to find you?
I would love anybody wants to have a conversation, just email me. It's connect@jessicarink.com and I'm on social media at Intuition Mindset.
Love it. Awesome. Please reach out to her. You won't regret it. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you. I love you, and we'll see you next time.